In 2008, a family in Nigeria gave their young child a course of antibiotics purchased from a local pharmacy for the treatment of a bacterial infection. The packaging looked correct. The pills looked identical to the genuine product. The dosage instructions were printed clearly. The medication contained no active ingredient. It was chalk and filler compressed into the shape of a pill, packaged in a convincing replica of the original manufacturer's box. The child's infection progressed untreated. The outcome was predictable. This is not an isolated case. It is not even an unusual one. The World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 10 medical products in low- and middle-income countries is either substandard or falsified. In some specific product categories and regional markets, the figure is dramatically higher. Antimalarials, antibiotics, antiretrovirals, cancer treatments, and insulin, medications whose absence kills, have been found in falsified form throughout sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and increasingly in markets previously considered relatively secure. The counterfeit pharmaceutical industry is not a collection of small-scale opportunists. It is an organized criminal enterprise, globally distributed, technically sophisticated, and extraordinarily profitable. It is also one of the deadliest industries on Earth. The economics that drive the counterfeit pharmaceutical market are straightforward and brutal. Genuine pharmaceutical manufacturing is expensive. Developing a new drug requires years of research, clinical trials, regulatory approval processes, and quality control infrastructure. The resulting product is priced to recover these costs and generate return for shareholders. In wealthy markets, insurance systems and government programs absorb much of this cost. In low-income markets, the retail price of genuine medication is frequently beyond the means of the people who need it most. This price differential creates the market. A family in a West African city, faced with the choice between spending a week's income on genuine animalarials and paying a fraction of that for something that looks identical, has no reliable way to evaluate the quality difference. The counterfeiter charges less than the genuine product, enough less to attract buyers, enough more than the cost of production to generate enormous profit. The cost of producing a convincing counterfeit pharmaceutical is primarily the cost of packaging. Tablet presses capable of producing convincing pill shapes are commercially available. Excipients, the inactive binding and filling materials that give pills their shape, are cheap. A modest active ingredient content can be included to pass simple colorimetric tests. High-quality printing of replica packaging has become progressively cheaper as digital printing technology has improved. The primary production costs are packaging, printing, and distribution. The active ingredient itself, if included at all, is often present in incorrect quantities. Subtherapeutic dosing. Enough of the drug to appear genuine in simple testing, but not enough to effectively treat the condition, is common in antibiotics and antimalarials. This is particularly insidious because it does not merely fail to treat the patient. It potentially creates conditions for antimicrobial resistance, as bacteria and parasites survive exposure to sublethal drug concentrations and develop tolerance. The logistics networks that move counterfeit pharmaceuticals from production to patient are sophisticated, adaptive, and deliberately difficult to trace. Primary manufacturing often occurs in regions with limited regulatory enforcement and low production costs. Investigations by Interpol, the WHO, and national regulatory agencies have identified significant manufacturing capacity in China and India. Not because these countries are uniquely corrupt, but because they host large generic pharmaceutical manufacturing sectors, and the equipment and chemical supply chains are readily accessible. Production facilities are often small, mobile, and able to relocate quickly when law enforcement attention focuses on them. From primary production, product moves through multi-layered distribution chains that are structurally similar to other criminal logistics networks. Goods are repackaged at transit points. Invoices and documentation are falsified at each stage to describe different products or different origins. Shipments are concealed within legitimate cargo, declared as a different product category, mixed with genuine goods, routed through jurisdictions with limited customs inspection capacity. The internet has added a dimension that has dramatically complicated enforcement. Online pharmacies, many operating from jurisdictions with minimal regulatory oversight, sell directly to consumers in wealthy countries, bypassing the regulated distribution channels that provide some protection in those markets. A consumer in the United States, United Kingdom, or Europe who orders prescription medication from an online pharmacy not affiliated with a licensed physical pharmacy is in many cases purchasing from a supply chain that offers no meaningful quality guarantee. The NABP, the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy in the United States, has estimated that the overwhelming majority of online pharmacies operating internationally do not comply with pharmacy laws and standards. Investigations have repeatedly found that medications purchased through these channels include counterfeit products, products with incorrect dosing, products with no active ingredient, and products with contaminating substances. The technical sophistication of the counterfeit pharmaceutical industry has increased substantially as manufacturers have deployed anti-counterfeiting technologies. Holograms on packaging were introduced by multiple manufacturers as a verification tool. Counterfeiters now produce convincing replica holograms. Color-shifting inks, fine-line printing, and other physical security features have been replicated. Scratch-off authentication codes, where a unique code printed under a scratch panel can be verified against a database, have been compromised in some markets by codes harvested from genuine products before or during distribution. Serialization, the assignment of a unique identifier to each individual package, traceable through the distribution chain, represents the current frontier of pharmaceutical authentication. The United States Drug Supply Chain Security Act and the European Union Falsified Medicines Directive both mandate serialization requirements that are progressively tightening the traceability requirements across the regulated supply chain. When fully implemented, these systems allow a pharmacist to verify that a specific package traveled through the legitimate distribution chain from manufacturer to patient. The limitation of serialization is that it applies to the regulated supply chain. The counterfeit pharmaceutical market operates outside the regulated supply chain by definition. A consumer purchasing medication from an unregulated online pharmacy, a market trader in a low-income country, or an informal distribution network is not in the system that serialization protects. Mobile authentication technologies are being deployed in some markets. Systems where a consumer sends a text message or scans a code to receive an immediate authenticity verification from the manufacturer's database. These systems work in markets with sufficient mobile connectivity and are used in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa. Their effectiveness depends on consumer awareness and uptake, and on the counterfeiter not having compromised the verification infrastructure. The human cost accumulates in ways that are difficult to measure with precision, but impossible to dismiss. The WHO estimates that falsified and substandard medicines cause hundreds of thousands of deaths annually. Malaria, treated with subtherapeutic or inactive antimalarials, kills. Bacterial infections, treated with ineffective antibiotics, kill. HIV, in patients whose antiretroviral medications contain insufficient active ingredient to suppress viral replication, progresses. Cancer, treated with diluted or inactive chemotherapy, advances. Beyond direct mortality, the contribution of subtherapeutic antibiotic and antimalarial use to drug resistance is a public health emergency in its own right. Antimicrobial resistance, the development in pathogens of tolerance to the drugs used to treat them, is one of the most serious long-term threats to global public health. Counterfeit medications that deliver sublethal doses of antibiotics to patients create precisely the selection pressure that drives resistance evolution. The cost of this contribution is not visible in any individual case, but accumulates in the form of pathogens for which effective treatments no longer exist. The counterfeit pharmaceutical network persists because it is profitable, because the populations most harmed by it have the least political power to demand effective response, and because the regulatory frameworks and enforcement resources that exist in wealthy countries do not extend to the markets where the harm is greatest. It persists because a pill looks like a pill, Because a convincing package is sufficient to sell a product in a context where verification is not available. Because the patient who buys the medication cannot know what is in it, and the person who sold it to them may not know either. They bought it from someone who bought it from someone who bought it from someone, and at the beginning of that chain was a facility that chose profit over the lives it was trading. The solution is not simple, because the problem is not simple. It is regulatory, economic, logistical, and ultimately political. It requires investment in supply chain infrastructure in the markets most affected, enforcement capacity in the jurisdictions where production occurs, and the kind of sustained international cooperation that has historically been difficult to sustain against problems that are invisible until they kill someone. The medication looked real. In the places that matter most to the people who die from it, that has been enough.